Hi, I'm Gerard Verga, and welcome to the Florida Family Law Attorney Podcast. This is season one, episode six, and we are honored to have someone in our area who has a lot of experience in leadership and strategic thinking. He's Max Perkins. He's joining us from Bay County today, where he's currently building a semi pro football team called the Panama City Panthers. Mr. Perkins comes with us with a background in Division One college football. For a decade, he was an airborne infantry officer who was deployed in Iraq, a championship winning football coach. So, Coach Perkins understands what it takes to overcome adversity and perform under pressure. So, Coach Perkins, thank you for taking the time out today. I know that you got a game today. And before we dive into it, I'd love for you to just give us a little introduction about yourself because you have such a diverse background in leadership and strategic thinking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Honored to be on board. Hopefully, whatever we come up with today can help others. So yeah, a ton of leadership background. Started in high school, of course, with regular sports, and turned out I was pretty good. And then kind of grew from there. D1, joined the military right afterwards and into the army. They saw I had a degree, sent me to officer school, so I became an infantry officer. When I got out, and of course with the infantry officer piece, I think at the time, this was 2008, 2007, they told us they spent $2 million to teach us to become army officers. That's strategy, that's planning, that's thinking about not only the mission on hand, but the secondary and tertiary effects. So we don't think about just about what we're doing next, but the second and third order effects and what comes next.
You're
The
not
way that
playing
plays
checkers,
into
you're playing chess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all about the big picture, especially on the officer side. The NCOs, the enlisted, they execute the mission. The officers are the planners and strategists. So it was, and I did both. I enlisted initially, then went to officer candidate school later. So had two different perspectives, which also helped me when it comes to leadership with the troops. The way we transfer that into football, it's the same concept. You know, football became huge after World War II and one when it comes to men coming back from combat and trying to adapt to society, and football was the outlet. And of course, it's grown spectacularly over the last 50 years, and is now one of the few areas in which leadership is paramount. Not so much academic. You need the strong voice, you need authoritative, but you also need strategy, tactics, and the knowledge and background in order to actually speak into the lives of the young men who are playing the sport.
Well, that's interesting because what I think about family law is family law involves some of the same concepts. You have to be thinking the long game. You got to be thinking about the future. You got to be thinking about what's coming ahead. And it's like whether you're in combat or you're on the football field, there's going to be times where things aren't going your way, and you got to improvise, or you have to be able to overcome that adversity and get your head back in the game and move forward. So, that's why I wanted you on the show because I think your background will give a lot of insights, to people who are facing these issues and, maybe haven't had the background and the $2 million education on strategic thinking and the experiences you've had. So I'm going to start off with our first question. You've had an incredible journey from, all region offensive lineman to army officer to championship winning football coach. Before we dive any deeper, could you share a pivotal moment that shaped your approach to overcoming challenges?
Hmm. Picking just one is the question.
I'll give you more
Well,
than one if you got more than one.
well, so I'll start with this, and this is a question I've answered more than once actually. The motivation, or should I say, when you join the military, especially when you're even considering becoming an officer, they ask this question, right? And they ask for an example. And the one that is burned into my brain is very early on. I think I was either a sophomore or junior in high school, and I remember riding on the bus. And I grew up in a rough part of Memphis. I'm cultured. I'm nice and civil now, but the upbringing was way rough, which led to the adversity and mental toughness. And it grew over time. You don't have that initially. You have to go through the fire in order to understand how to overcome it. But the initial memory which sticks out is I was sitting in the middle of a bus and these bullies were talking about beating up these smaller kids on the front of the bus. And to me, that was just wrong. So I changed seats, moved up, told these kids, what was going to happen when we get off the bus. You guys take off running. I'm a big guy. Played offensive line in college. I'm going to stand in the aisle and block the seats and block all these bullies. And I did. And that to me was a pivotal mark in my life in terms of how to stand up for others and then using my size to protect others, which led to the military. And now is, circling back to the football piece where I can influence people, especially young men nowadays, on how to overcome that adversity. It isn't just an emotional response that happens, but you have to use intellect as well, because now versus 20 years ago, you can't simply get in a street fight and then move on. Now there's a huge amount of consequences where violence is no longer the answer. Not that necessarily was back then, but the consequences for any of your actions, especially with the advent of social media, is so great and vast. You don't want to become a meme.
So I think you hit it spot on. I think that you hit on two things there that we could kind of unpackage. I mean, first off, I think that that's a an underlying tone for a lot of family law attorneys I speak to, that we want to stand up for the little guy, or we want to protect somebody when they're in a vulnerable position. And I think sometimes that's what, that's your why on why you do what you do, why you become a family law attorney or an attorney, even in other fields. It's the same thing. We may not be, the brawniest guys like you, but we may have the brain, and using that brain in a way to block that aisle and, give the guy some coverage and try to get him out of a spot. And then the other thing I think you touched on that rings true to family law is social media. I cannot tell you the number of cases over 20 years I've been doing this that have been affected by social media, where somebody has said something or posted something, or and it's drastically altered that person's case and how the court perceives that person. And even if it was an off-colored comment, a joke, something they were not aware that was going to get posted, but you can't outrun it. It doesn't go away. Once it's out there, it's pretty much out there forever. And those are, things that I know I stress to my kids, I stress to my clients, that we live in a different world and it's not forgiving anymore. And please be careful with your social media.
Yep. And I'll speak to the family law practice in general. So again, the Army told us how much they paid us to teach us how to be officers and lead and whatnot. And part of as an officer, especially company commander, executive officer, rifle platoon leader, all positions I've held, there's a lot of resiliency built into the training that even as officers that we give our troops. That was more toward the second half of that main 10 years of war there. But my time in, and I joined 07, 08, it was all about resiliency. How can you go and do these terrible things in defense of whatever war or whatever your country asks you, especially as an infantry or combat arms or any of the special guys, right? We're trained to be able to kick a door down, do whatever we got to do, accomplish the mission, and then get back home, whatever it is. The part which, it's still a growing field now, is that resiliency. How do you come home after a deployment of 6, 9, 12 months, 18 months, 20, whatever it is? How do you come back home and reintegrate and be normal? And then once you take off the uniform, and it took me years. I mean, it probably took me years, 10 years, in order to feel like I fully acclimated back to being a civilian with the training as a military, but that resiliency piece. And then you talk about family law, especially with divorce. It's tragic. It tears families asunder. There's no way around it, right? Regardless of whether it's justified or not, there's going to be a lot of heartache and break. But it's the experience that you guys bring to us when we come in, knowing that we're in the middle of what is in essence a tragedy. There will be trauma. There will be things you have to overcome in order to change life and get back to whatever the normal is.
Family law is about resiliency and trying to see that there's something beyond the horizon, and to help a person get back up, or to help the person find that in them and help them with the path forward. And, lots of times in cases, there's high points, there's low points, there's emotional high points and low points as a person transitions from married to single, and just, being there and then offering, where you can, solutions, advice, friendship. They're emotionally not in a position, in my opinion, where they're maybe thinking logically. And so at that point, you're stepping in and you're trying to drive the boat and get them through those rough waters until they can take the wheel again and start moving forward and making good decisions and having that clarity to make the right decisions, because they're going through so much emotionally. And then, you touched on something else that, in the panhandle of Florida, I think we're surrounded by 5 military bases.
Yes, we are.
So the number of cases we've had where we've had, people come back from being deployed, or have, seen some pretty hostile stuff, and now they're back into civilian life, and, it puts a strain on the marriage. It can put a strain on that person's, behaviors and them adjusting, and, then trying to tell that story to the court of, that they're just what they're going through, or making the court understand that they're just going through a transition. I've seen cases where a person's obviously been suffering or been diagnosed with PTSD. And that's become an issue in the case related to custody and the safety of the children, and having to get, a social investigator or mental health professional involved in the case to, to see the level of the PTSD, if it really does affect, their parenting capabilities. And then how do we help this person adjust, be resilient, acclimate, and then, get back into the parenting and being able to be the parent they want to be. So, that's a big thing that a lot of guys in the military or former military people don't want to talk about because it's raw, it's emotional, it's pretty painful. But it is something that, I think that as a family law attorney, it's something if you're dealing with military clients, you have to kind of keep that in mind because that is something that's going to come up.
If anybody joins the military, just going through basic training alone is a form of trauma because they have to, and I wrote leadership articles with the military on this. They have to break you down from the selfish individual that you are so that when you're through with that 10, 11, 12 weeks of boot camp, you now can reintegrate into a team. It's like making somebody coachable, but for the military. So everybody's got some kind of trauma, a PTSD associated with military before they even deploy downrange. When you come back, that's where the resiliency training comes into play and how you have to figure out how to cope. It's okay to have trauma as long as you're dealing with it properly or have a good coach, right? Can't play games of football without a coach. Same with divorce. You don't want to coach yourself. You need somebody who's got the experience to let you know what, it's okay as long as the proper steps are handled. As long as you're doing the proper thing, you just got to tell the truth. And when you do, it's okay to not be 100% okay all the time, as long as you're taking the proper steps to overcome that.
Well, one of the things that, not that law school is as traumatic as boot camp, but as you go through law school, you get seniority, you become a third year law student. Sometimes the professors start to treat you as a human being. In the beginning, there's not a whole lot of, at least when I went to law school, not a lot of human emotion there. They stand you up, they, question you, they interrogate you in front of the room. If I messed up and didn't answer the question correctly, they kind of knew who your buddy was, and then they'd stand your buddy up and make his life miserable. And they would keep going around the room doing that
Yeah.
because you didn't do your part. When I asked them, one of my professors, my third year of law school, and I said, why did y'all do that to us? He said, everybody in this room is a smart individual. Everybody in here is, top notch. They wouldn't have got in. He said, the first thing I have to do is get you to realize that you don't know anything. He said, we're in my world now. You don't know anything about law, and I have to break you down so I can then rebuild you the way we want you rebuilt, the way we want you to process the information. I never did forget that because when I would watch boot camp movies and I would see the drill sergeant on the person, it would immediately take me back to law school. And, when we represent military people, I do like representing them because there's a lot of parallels. The judge outranks me. The order is the order is the order, and you will follow the order. There's not any gray areas. If you think there's a gray area, you better seek clarification of the order through the proper channel and the right process. The rules are the rules. I heard somebody say one time that, an officer is never wrong and never late. And I've always thought that's funny because my same expression about the judge is the judge is never wrong. The judge is never late. You will be courteous. And if you do disagree with an order, there's a proper channel to voice that, but it's not there in front of the judge. And it's, and the decorum and the respect and the things that, I tell people to bring into the courtroom. I think people with a military background already have a leg up in understanding some of those concepts that, this is it, whether you agree with it or not. And we will be respectful and honor the court system. So, as an offensive lineman, you were essentially the protector on the field. How'd that role shape your perspective on handling defensive pressures? And, how does that translate maybe to, people going through a divorce on how to get through defensive pressures?
Yep. So offensive linemen are usually the smartest guys on the field. I mean, of course, we've got a quarterback who's the leader of the offense, but the offensive lineman has to be able to cover his buddy left to right. He's got to be able to pick up blitzes and control the usually fast and strong defensive lineman who's coming at you with the intent of killing your buddy who's trying to score a touchdown. I was told this some time back, and it's always stuck in the back of my brain is as an offensive lineman, we're the only player on the field whose back is always toward the ball. And the intent is to protect more so than anything else. So When you're thinking about defense, again, you have to anticipate based off whatever your offensive play or scheme is, you have to anticipate what the defense is going to do. Most of it is predictable. There's some instances where we can trick a defense, but that's rare because football's been around for 100 plus years now. So most of the things have been discovered. Most coaches who are students of the game can and will anticipate what the offense is going to run. So it's up to us to execute. There's fundamentals, which comes into play, which can transfer over to family law and divorce instances. There are just some things that you have to do. You spoke to it earlier when it comes to certain orders, certain procedures, certain paperwork, certain things not to say on social media. Another thing when it comes to offensive line or offensive coordinator is the way an offense, outside of just executing perfectly, overcomes the defense is we have to figure out a way to make the sides uneven. Football, there's 11 on 11. If I have a certain formation where I got two wideouts one way, I got a slide out to the left, and I got a halfback and a fullback, or whatever the formation is, the defense has to adjust to that. And as an offense coordinator, OC, you're trying to figure out at what side do you have the advantage? Where are you going to have more guys on the field than the defense? Or how can I trick them in order to have their entire defense flow one direction when in actuality the play is going the opposite direction?
Well, one of the things, that, sometimes I see in family law, you're talking about, your back being to the ball and you're defending, the you're defending the play is, sometimes, in family law, being strategic about steering the case where you need it to go, making the focus about something, maybe the other side wants to focus on this topic, but if you can, move the focus to a different topic and perhaps rely discovery on this other topic, or, you kind of make that, sometimes we call it too deflating the ball. If I know that they're going to, ask you a lot of questions about something that we don't enjoy talking about, that it's not going to be maybe the most flattering for us, I will often volunteer the information. I will go ahead and get you to address it with me on a direct examination. I will be able to control how that information comes out, and I will be able to, take the sting perhaps out of that. And then, when you're doing it, people are humans. A judge once told me that everybody's got warts. He said the people who come in here and tell me they don't have warts are the ones I'm worried about and the ones I'm looking at. So I've always took that piece of advice and thought about it. If I know that there's going to be a problem, I know there's going to be something that comes up that's not flattering. Let's go ahead and own it. Let's talk about it early. Let's frame it in the context we want it framed, as opposed to letting them play their game. If you think about it, if you have a cross examination and it's a person that's a veteran, you have PTSD, correct? You're on medication, correct? You've had to have extensive therapy, correct? When in the cross examination, it sounds like you're hiding something or you've done something wrong, as opposed to, sir, can you tell me about your service? And how many tours of duty did you do? And, what sacrifices did you make physically for our country? And did that affect you psychologically? And have you been diagnosed with anything as a result of your defense of our country? And how is that being handled? What treatments are you undergoing? Have you taken responsibility for that when dealing with that in an adult manner? Now, if the other side asks you those cross examination questions, well, one is the judge says he just told me, so why are you wasting my time? I just heard this. Two is you kind of look like a jerk because now you're dressing down a combat veteran. I think that's something that rings true for football and family law, is controlling the play.
That's the
So, you're
anticipation piece. That's the anticipation piece too. When you're talking about, especially with again veterans, and again it's near dear to me, but a lot of us are misunderstood as a whole. And if you didn't take the sting or deflate the ball with your line of questioning, the opposition isn't going to ask you what treatment that you pursued, or was that treatment effective, or how long ago did you have that treatment, how long ago have you been good. They're not going to ask those questions.
a good cross examination question, in my opinion, is one fact per question. The light was red, correct? You were at the light. You weren't looking at the street, correct? You were fiddling with the radio, correct? Those are your standards. And what you're doing is you're trying to put the person in a cadence of very short response, limiting the explanation. You're actually doing the testifying because I'm the one telling the facts, and you're just going, yeah, uh-huh. And if it's done correctly, you get into a pattern of just saying yes to pretty much anything because you're just hearing horrible, traumatic facts being fired off in rapid succession that all end with normally a yes answer, and the person, psychologically gives. And then in law school, if they don't give, they teach techniques, all right, so you don't ask a question you don't know the answer to.
Mhm.
That's one. And if I ask you the light was red, there's usually a deposition or a statement or something that I have, but you've already said the light was red. So if you say no to me, then I'm going to say, well, didn't you give a sworn statement on such and such a date? And you were there, and your lawyer was there, and Madam Court Reporter was there, and kind of turn your attention to page 5 of that transcript, and and then can you read that to the judge? And now I'm going to make you like a horrific liar, or that you have a memory problem or something's going on
Mhm.
with you and you're not credible. And then usually people just fall back into the better just say yes. And they don't get to fully explain. And then the law has a
There's a
redirect where we can come in and salvage it with redirect. But I don't, my personal opinion, and maybe it's you, that's maybe in football terms, that's you trying to win the game in the fourth quarter. I don't want to have to come back in at the end of this and try to clean it up when I can present it in a way in the beginning that shuts off those avenues of attack.
Yep, anticipate what the defense is gonna do, then shut it down. And again, I'm going back and forth between football and being the veteran. Is veteran, we take an oath. Like 97% of society, we take an oath, and we are taught to answer truthfully. And that's yes and no. So if you ask me a question, I'm gonna say yes or no. And then if you don't, as the opposition, allow me to color that a little bit with explanation, I'm still telling the truth, but to me, it's a partial truth. But as a witness, you don't get to just talk unless somebody asks an open-ended question. So yes or no, they're going to cut you off, and you're not going to be able to fill in the context of, well, yes, I did have PTSD, and yes, I sought treatment, and that was 10 years ago, right? That 10 years ago matters. And if that question, that answer never got to be spoken because you didn't anticipate it coming, then it's same as not anticipating a blitz in defense or offense. If you don't anticipate where the linebacker, the Mike linebacker is going to penetrate the A gap, B gap, or whatever it is, you can't prepare to stop it or prepare a play that's going to take advantage of them looking in the wrong spot.
Sometimes nobody's perfect. You cannot anticipate every line of question. You don't know what the other side's going to say. In a trial, there's no exchange of the questions beforehand. You usually get to see the exhibits, but you don't get to see the other guy's questions. So if you have to redirect in the trial and you get to ask some follow up questions to redirect, um, I like to use the redirect as I kind of think of it, if you get the opportunity, if everything lines up perfectly, it's your jujitsu moment where you can flip it around. Mr. Perkins, you were asked this about being a veteran. You were asked about your mental health. You were asked, all these things on cross examination, correct? And you've been with your wife for 30 years or whatever the case may be, and she knew that you were partaking in this treatment, didn't she? So she certainly knows that that treatment, was done or has been done for 10 years, and she's worried about it here today because her attorney spent the last 5 minutes questioning you about this. Did she leave you alone with the kids during the last 10 years? Did she let you coach their pee wee football team during the last 10 years? Did she give you a Father's Day card in the last 10 years telling that you were a great dad? And flipping it back around to, because, you know, in our, in my experience, sometimes very small issues that were really not an issue during the marriage are all of a sudden a big issue in the divorce case because somebody's trying to use it, make a mountain out of a molehill, and being able to flip that right back around, and then ultimately you get your chance to question the wife or to question the other spouse, and you thought that the service was, his service related injuries or mental health issues were a really big deal, so much that we did this today and these questions were asked and you were here the entire time and you heard, saw that your spouse took this onslaught of questioning. But and if you thought it was an issue, why did you decide to go on a girls' weekend and leave the children with the other spouse? Or why did you let him pick them up from school every day, for the last 10 years? Or point out to the judge that this has not really been the issue and never was the issue, but it's just an issue on game day at trial, and and shutting that down. Well, one thing, I think that comes up a whole lot, and I think you have a unique perspective on it militarily. and as a football coach is clients get very mad at me at times because I cross examine them. I'll put them in the conference room and I will start cross examining them and asking very pointed questions, rapid fire, one fact, one answer questions. And I will try to break them down or point out the weak points in their case. And they'll tell me, well, you don't believe me. The way you just questioned me, you don't believe me. And I don't expect my lawyer to do that. And I have to explain to them that a good offense knows what the defense is going to do.
Mhm.
And if I can come up with those questions, normally I don't write them down. It's just normally on the fly. It's a little role play exercise. I'm getting them ready for the hearing that's coming up, or maybe point out that this is not a good avenue for us to take the case. But I think to be in anything that requires a strategy to have any chance of success, the offense has to understand the defense has to understand the offense, and you have to be able to move out of your headspace and into your opponent's headspace and be able to take that perception of the facts or the field and be able to come up with those questions or anticipate those things. As a football coach and as a military person, what can you say about that?
When we talk about football, if you don't go in the weight room, find out what your weaknesses are. Say you got a really good endurance, but again, we go back to offensive line. If your upper body strength isn't at the right level in order to protect against the defensive rush, you're not prepared. And when you do that, especially in that scenario, you're prepping the clients for what the defense is going to bring at them next. And you're also pointing out their weaknesses. So again, you can address that. Sometimes you don't have much time, so shore that up, say in the gym, but that's where your experience comes into play of protecting them by prepping them and getting them ready.
People, though, I mean, they get really, frustrated with it. They're like, "Oh, you're not representing me because you're asking those questions. You're not seeing it my way." And one of the things I see as a family law attorney and as someone who thinks about, trial and strategy is everybody can see their case. Just like the players on the field, I'm sure see the play because you've practiced the play, you know the play, you've lived the play, they've lived their lives, they know their story, they know, but
Mhm.
it's very hard to get sometimes people to anticipate where the defense is going to go and where this case where they're going to attack those points in your story or in your case. What's that expression? Everybody's got a plan till somebody gets punched in the face.
Oh yeah, a plan
Yeah, the plan
never
breaks down quick.
survives contact. The plan never survives contact with the enemy. Even with the military, we call it 80% solution. I need at least 80% of a plan before we can execute movement with the expectation that something's going to fail. Same thing with football. I mean, we have a plan that solves 80% of the defensive scheme that we're going to go against. However, we have to have a backup plan just in case that goes wrong. We have to be ready to change the play and call an audible on the fly. And again, that's where your experience comes into play when instances like that. I can't anticipate it. I haven't gone through it.
Well, as a football coach, how do you teach the players to adapt to the unexpected when the play goes south, when the defense is maybe one up to you on and it's not going your way? How do you teach them to do the anticipation and the quick thinking on the fly?
So that comes down to practice, rehearsals, talking about the scheme of the game, and that again, something is going to go wrong. We have to stick to the fundamentals. We have to stick to the game plan. But more importantly, I'm a fan of Ted Lasso. That was a great show, great coach. I would love to try to emulate him. It talks about a player had a terrible play, fell down, got owned by the opposition during practice rehearsal. The coach picks him up and says, "What animal has the shortest memory?" And it's a goldfish. 5 seconds. Goldfish has a 5 second memory. Accept the fact this one didn't go right and prepare for the next one. But again, that's in practice. He was prepping that player for when it happened during the game with the expectation that, let's just say, if you are surprised with a question, you may show emotion and react and say the wrong thing, but you have to adapt going forward. You have to have that emotional maturity and that resilience in order to change for the rest of the questioning or the rest of the trial itself.
Well, one of the things that I try to coach them on or try to teach them is exactly what you said. There's going to be some point in the hearing where somebody says something that you disagree with. You may think it's just a bull-faced lie. It may be, something that's unflattering that came out or unanticipated information. And they'll immediately start punching me in the arm or, ruffling stuff around on the desk. And, one of the things that I had a trial coach when I was in law school and he wanted it executed just like he said, there was no sense of humor about it whatsoever. You're a young lawyer or law student, and you make the face like, "Oh my god, can't believe he just said that." That look, and he said, "Son, you just put an exclamation point on it." He said, "Because when you showed that face, the judge saw that, and he knew you weren't prepared, or that you didn't know that was coming, or that scared you or shocked you, and you just put an exclamation point on it." He said the very best thing to is to not react to it. Don't let it phase you. Keep your poker face. Maybe even smile, like, and like a like I don't care kind of smile. And I thought that was interesting. It's something I kept with me. And I went to a continuing legal education course a few months ago, and one of the judges there, imparted a little wisdom and said, sometimes there's a witness that doesn't really do anything for the case, doesn't really move the needle, and he said, when you get up there and you cross examine them for 30 minutes, he said, all of a sudden I think, what did I miss? They must be important because you spent all this time on them. And I'm going back through my notes and, thinking I missed something, or maybe I give that little bit of information a lot more weight because gave it so much attention. He said, if it's really an insignificant witness and there's nothing to cross examine them on really, he said, please don't. He's like, because you're probably hurting your case. Which I think as lawyers, a lot of times we feel compelled that if we don't cross examine them, we're not doing our job, or our client thinks we're laying down. Or he said, if it's a records custodian or someone who's, an insignificant witness. It's like, they haven't done anything to hurt you, and they haven't done anything really to prove anything. They're just, basic facts that are not earth shattering facts. He said, don't cross examine them. He's like, because I'm telling you, you're making the judge think that they must have something to say, or there's real weight there, and avoid it. So
It's a distraction. It's the same thing they do on defense. And when I coach defenses, I do the same thing. Hey, hoot and holler. When you're rushing the pass rusher, if you're not going to make a sack, then jump up and throw your hands in the air. You're a distraction from allowing the offense in order to execute.
let's say that you, with your military experience and your football coaching and football playing experience, we're going to open up a business where you coached people going through a divorce or family law case. What drills would you have them do to stay, mentally, physically healthy, and to keep them in the right mindset going through something like that?
Sure. Easy answer, by the way, because I think this goes and echoes throughout life in general to include anything that's stressful. You have to sleep. And I know that's especially with emotional trauma, that's tough. And divorce is that. You have to sleep. You have to eat right. And right. It's the basic stuff doesn't change. The fundamentals doesn't change. In sports, it's the same way. If an athlete is unrested and is not properly nourished, their mind is going to fade, or they're going to miss something, or they're going to make a misstep or a bad call, bad judgment call. So nutrition, sleep, huge. Find an outlet. The way the military members are able to execute these extremely tough missions, whether you're a mechanic or a refueler or a special forces Navy SEAL, is being in shape. That you can't necessarily do that at all times. And, as a civilian, you're not going to be in that level of shape, but find a physical outlet. That's the point more than anything else. If you know that you're in for a tough time, maybe don't go into the gym with the expectation of competing in a bodybuilding challenge, but do some kind of physical cardio. Right? All the science says that serotonin is released, which makes you feel better, which helps depression, which helps your head by exercise. Go outside, get sun. Vitamin D, which comes from the sun in a moderate amount, is good for your mental health. But all of those things, nutrition, sleep, exercise, meditation, yoga, those are great things. I like Tai Chi. I'm a big fan of Tai Chi. I've had a lot of surgeries, arthritis, and stuff from my various sports and military endeavors. And Tai Chi is great, but you got to find something that's going to allow your mind to calm down and hopefully get rid of some of that stress. Because again, if we look at the science, stress releases cortisol, which makes depression worse, which makes your body ache, which makes you want to sleep all the time. So again, nutrition, sleep, walk. You don't have to go to the gym. Walk. Go and do something physical, and just getting out of the house is often enough to get you out of your funk. And again, not only is it that one instance, but you build that over time, it becomes a good habit. That allows you to become more resilient and endure stress.
And if you're not taking care of you, I tell parents this a lot who are going through family law. If you're not taking care of you, you can't take care of the people who depend on you. I tell the
100%.
attorneys that I work with, if you're not taking care of you, you can't take care of the clients, you can't take care of the cases. You have to take care of you first. In fact, I took a flight today and I was flying back from Atlanta. And, I was thinking about that principle because the stewardess said, first put the oxygen mask on you, then assist the other people. And that's not a selfish maneuver as much as it is if you're not in a good, healthy state, you can't take care of all the people that rely on you. And, whether you're an attorney or a parent going through a family law case, you have to take care of your basic needs, your health, your mental health, your physical health, and be strong so that you can make, the right decisions and take care of the people that are counting on you. So, fun question, and then I will let you talk about the Panthers for a minute, but so I had the pleasure of listening to a Navy SEAL when I was in Atlanta speak about his time at Buds, and it was fascinating. And so I put on Facebook a post that it was number one, embrace the suck. Number two, it's not over till it's over. And number three was your mind is a lot stronger than you think it is. And he told us that, first off, he said, water is the equalizer. Because when you go lay in the cold water, he said, you come out of your he said one thing different about SEAL school is like other branches, they hose you. They hit you with a hose. He said there's no hose in SEAL school really. He's like, you leave your nice warm bunk and immediately walk outside and go lay down in the surf for as long as they want you to in the freezing cold water in December. And he's like, he said, because they're making you make a choice. It's not someone else hitting you with the water. You're going to have to go lay your body in the freezing water. And he said that was, embracing the suck to just go in and get wet and do it. And then he was talking about it's not over till it's over. He said they do not tell you how long you will be in the water. You do not know. He said sometimes they will bring you out the water and 30 seconds later just to put you right back in. And he told a really interesting story that they had to run. I think it was 6 miles in the sand, high tide, and 30 minutes. He said, so they ran it. He said, wet and covered in sand is how you run this. And he said, we ran it. And he said, I'm seeing him. He said, I was in good shape and I was a runner. So he said, that was a good part for me. He said, I got back. He said, I'm watching my buddies running, growing up, got to pass out, trying to get it done in the 32 minutes or whatever the time interval was. And he said, when we got done, everybody then jumps in the water, voluntarily, to cool off. He said, because you're burning up. And he said, our commanding officer said, guys, I hate to tell you all this, but I forgot to hit the stopwatch. We're going to have to do it again. And he said, right then and there, numerous people just quit. He said, because in their mind, they thought it was over when it
Yeah.
really was not over. And then, he said, you have to, come up with ways to cope and you have your mind convince itself and your body that it's a lot stronger than what you give it credit for. So I posted that and you immediately commented from your background about embrace the suck. So can you give us a story from your military about embracing the suck or some words of wisdom like that are humorous but life altering words?
Yeah, no, and that is a training technique that is echoed across the military, especially combat arms. And the Navy SEALs are the best of the best of the best, tip of the spear. Those guys, mentally and physically, are the elite. Period. The end of story. But as an infantryman, combat arms, similar training. You don't ever know when a mission or the battle is going to be done. And so they put you through all of these different scenarios to the same effect. It's about building that mental resiliency. I'll go back to football for this one, actually. One of the things I like doing, and there's been movies made about this, is whether it be mid-season, particularly, I should say this, I like doing it after a big victory. Because a big victory, usually guys have, they're super excited, which is great, but their ego and their pride shoot way up. And you can't play at this level and be good all the time, not with 11 guys trying to play it as a team. And so you have to figure out a way to keep the momentum, keep the excitement, but you got to bring them back down a little bit in order to get them playing at where they were during the game itself. And of course, the way we do that is physical exercise, right? So we had these guys doing bear crawls and same deal. I lost counts. Oh, we were going to do 30. What are we at? We're at 20, right? Or push-ups, down, up, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0. That is echoed across the military for all branches, especially when you're in training. Is push-ups used to be a mandatory physical test, fitness test requirement, and in order to prep for that, drill sergeant have everybody start doing push-ups. You need counts, right? 1, 2, 3, 1. Well, initially, when you first get there, it's 0 for 50 reps. 1, 2, 3, 0. 1, 2, 3, 0. Same concept. The concept is to get you used to not knowing what's coming next and still being able to perform, to push. But yeah, I use that in coaching, and the military is famous for that as well. But the intent is to get you physically ready, but also to train that mental resilience, which is really hard to build. But once you build it up, you're very good for a long time. It's just maintaining that level of resiliency which comes into play.
When he was talking, my wife was with me, and I whispered to her, and I said, "I know you're gonna think that this is silly because I'm not being thrown in the freezing cold water in December, and I'm not running 4 miles and or 6 miles at high tide in the sand in 30 minutes." I said, "But it's funny, some of those same principles at law school, they would, were things I learned. The longer it took me to hit the books after class or to go force myself in the library or into the environment I need to be in for that particular task and to start the training, it just got harder and harder or it didn't happen. So we would, we would, I had a buddy I studied with, and we had a strict rule that, you had like 45 minutes from the last class to when the study group started, and that was for dinner, shower, whatever you needed to do personally. And then we started like clockwork, and then it had to be at least, I think every night we would go 8 hours, and sometimes longer, but you were the minimum of eight. And personal distractions, personal life didn't matter. That's what we had to do. And so I told her, I
Mhm.
said, I think that was, embracing the suck. And I think the reason that that's an important skill, maybe in law school, I think that when you're going into a trial, you're going into a hearing, you're going into a deposition. I don't know how long I'm going to need to study that information. I don't know. I know it's not going to be fun. Nobody wants to do. It's not like you're sitting at home watching TV or playing with your kids, but you just embrace it, you own it, and that's what your job is at the moment. And you don't think about it, you just do it. And then I have a friend of mine who's an attorney, and sometimes I get on we're on opposite ends of the case, and the deposition will, say starts at 9, and it might be 12 hours. I have left depositions at almost 10 o'clock at night. But if you thought it's over at 5 and you come in with the expectation that it's over at 5 and you want it to be over at 5 because you're not mentally prepared that this thing could go forever, you're not going to play, once 5 o'clock comes, your mind's going to play that trick on you that this should be over and you're tired and guards going down. When people ask me, hey, you got a trial, what time's that supposed to be over? I was like, when it's over. And family law too, and you're just not even in trial. The day isn't over at 5. The day's over when the work is done. And however long it takes is what we're going to do because that's what it takes to do it. And that's the mindset. I think that's all those overlays, and that's why I thought it was very important to share that. Because I was like
Well,
this
embracing the
had
suck,
really echoed.
it speaks a lot to the why too. In
Mhm.
training, your why is to graduate and become a Navy SEAL in his instance, or an infantryman in my instance, or in family law instance, the why is to get to the end, and have some kind of resolution which works out for everybody, and that you can move on. It's for the end. More importantly, is how do I move on with my life? You
Well,
can't,
you
you
know what?
can't, you can't lose sight of that.
It's funny you brought up the why because I didn't bring it up, but what he was teaching us too was he said that he now counsels people who are thinking about going in on the sills, and he said they'll come up to me and, sir, I can run this in this time and I can bench press this, and he's like, I don't care. He's like, that's not what I'm here for. He's like, you're either, you can go to the gym or get a personal trainer and master all that. He said that number one thing is he wants to know what your why is. He said, if you do not impress him with the why, or you cannot answer the why within like 30 seconds, he actually will turn you down as a pupil, he won't mentor you because he said, I have a pretty good success rate. And he said, people who do not have the why, don't know why they're doing it, don't have the passion for it, they will not, normally succeed. He said, because you're hanging on to that why when you're almost getting hypothermia. He's like, that's what's going to push you. He said, it doesn't matter that you're a stellar athlete. He said, because everybody gets hypothermia. He said, the difference is this person has a passionate why that's going to drive them, to take their body right to the brink of hypothermia. And the person that may just be an excellent athlete, physically, in shape, doesn't have the mental why that they're going to need to keep that mind strong, going, and focused on the goal. So, look, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. I know that we briefly touched on it in the intro, that you're now coaching this semi-pro team here in Panama City called the Panama City Panthers. Tell the audience a little bit about that and how they can catch a game and they can follow you guys on social media.
Sure. So Panama City Panthers, we're a semi-pro team in a 22 team league. Another way for guys to get film in order to go play arena ball or the next level. If we equate it, it's like AAA baseball, except for football. So guys who still have either the passion that they just want to play because they love the sport, or if they're trying to get looks from recruiters, this is one of the teams which can help you do that. So we're about 3 months new, and the intent is, especially with Bay County, is we have a lot of very good athletes that once they're done with high school or college, they don't really have another endeavor. They don't want to play softball or baseball, so football is the natural route. So when the owners created this team, there was already 15 players in the area who were traveling to Dothan or Fort Walton or even Pensacola in order to be part of the team. So we already kind of had a team here when we were initially started. You can track us on Panama City Panthers on Facebook, Instagram. Those are new, so the social media presence is began blowing up. If you go on our website, you'll see our schedule. Again, we're based out of Panama City. We have a game tonight at 7 at the Arnold High School Gadlack Field. So come out. It's a great time. And again, it's fun coaching, and it's 18 and older. And I even have a 58-year-old quarterback who is one of those stellar athletes who, if he decided to join the military 30 years ago, he would be Navy SEAL. That's the type of conditioning this guy has. But it's a good time, and again, it's about people who are passionate about the sport. I'll say this as well. One of the emphasis we try to do is as much community involvement as possible, and ours is focused on troubled youth, right? Most troubled youth need a stronger personality to help them kind of see their way future, to see their way forward, and to help kind of craft their own why. I'm not going to tell you what your why is, but my job is to help guide you to that. And we do a lot with the community, whether it be players or coaches or the staff in general. I think half the staff works for nonprofits, and the owners included, in order to give back to the communities. Our team is based off a brotherhood, and we want it to be a brotherhood. Guy broke his ankle on a team. Great guys named Superman. He's stellar. That's just happened Saturday, and he was moving the next 2 or 3 days. And we came together as a team, helped them pack it up and move on. And I think today we had two community events this morning at Glenwood Community Center, which we were part of. And yeah, the intent isn't just to play football. The intent is to continue the team camaraderie and the teamwork and the team environment that football kind of provides.
That's so great. Thank you for, giving back to the community and being part of that and adding that to the things that we can do here in Panama City and go see. And look, we will definitely have you back on. And I appreciate you taking an hour of your time and touching on some real raw subjects and sharing your experiences with us. So just if you are watching, if you could please, like, share, and subscribe. I think the last time I checked, in a few short weeks, we are up to 1,600 followers, and it's all about giving information and sharing information about family law and key topics in family law, and hearing and getting the opportunity to talk to some really great people about their experiences and how you can apply those experiences and information to your family law situation or just to your life in general. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.